Welcome to the Tyrant Network podcast. I'm Corey Frederick, your host, and I'm off the mat today with none other than Coach Jack Holloway. Coach, thanks for joining us today.
It's fun. Better.
As always, I kind of like to go let our audience know who I'm meeting with, and then really kind of open up and learn more about you and talk about a lot of things that I think are interesting. But you're born and raised in Delaware.
Absolutely.
Kind of jump forward a little bit. I don't know too much about your childhood, but I know that you went to Salesianum School. Most people know it as Sally's in Wilmington, Delaware. You graduated with your bachelor's from the University of Delaware, and then you went on and got your master's at Delaware State University. Coming out of there, and I don't know all the timelines, but you were in the U.S. Army Reserves for 30 years. You were an infantryman and a lieutenant colonel. Going into William Penn High School, you were an athletic director. Well, you turned to be an athletic director, but you started off being a health and phys ed teacher. And then I'm just going to rip through this because you just have a ton of accomplishments here, Coach. But I know you coach football, wrestle, and baseball. You were the William Penn High School wrestling coach for about 25 years. You had 14 undefeated seasons. You had a dual meet record of 297 and 35. Some of these stats could be pretty close, but not 100%. You had the most wins in Delaware State history. You had 7 team state champions, 8 Blue Hen Conference championships. In the individual state tournament, you had 39 champs. You had 112 Blue Hen Conference champions. At the state tournament, you had 6 outstanding wrestlers over the years. You were 7-time Coach of the Year. In 2000, you were the National Coach of the Year. In 2001, you became the president of the National Wrestlers Coaches Association. 2003, you were inducted into the Delaware Wrestling Hall of Fame. 2016, National Federation of State High School Association Hall of Fame. You were 24 years on the State Wrestling Committee. And back then, and I think that was when I was starting to wrestle, is when this process started, but you were instrumental in what we know now as like the body fat and the testing and all that stuff for weigh-ins. Really what I guess they called it back then was the safe weight class that's now mandatory for all states. So that's it on the professional side of things. I know you've been married for 57 years. You had 2 sons. And I'm just going to kind of stop there and let you take over a little bit, but I know a lot about you, but it's more about from the wrestling perspective. You were across the mat from us because I wrestled at St. Mark's, and that was the crosstown rival. William Penn was a public school in Newcastle, and St. Mark's was a few miles away, but we were the private Catholic school. Funny enough, I actually grew up in Newcastle before I moved when I got a little bit older, and my mom and my uncle went to William Penn High School, but you were across the mat, didn't know much about you. I know your teams were always tough, had a lot of respect for you. Sometimes I didn't know if I liked you or hated you. And it was probably the same way going across the mat from your side of the fence. But plenty of friends from Newcastle and guys that wrestled or from William Penn. But tell us about your childhood or kind of how you got to where you are today. Or even to William Penn, I guess, and how you became one of the winningest wrestling coaches ever.
It's a kind of diverse story. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it should never have happened. I can't believe I actually became a wrestling coach, because I think I would have loved the sport if somebody would have got me interested in it, but it didn't exist when I was in high school. Salesianum did not have a team.
Really?
So, I mean, I had no chance at wrestling. I think if somebody would have grabbed me, I would have probably gravitated to that, but no chance. But then, there's more strange parts. Now, I went to the University of Delaware, like you're saying. I was a phys ed major. I had transferred from the University of Maryland. I went to Maryland on a football scholarship, and I transferred back to Delaware. And so I wasn't planning on being a phys ed major. Maryland had physical therapy. It was the reason I went there. They were one of 2 schools in the country at the time. Delaware now has one of the top programs in the country, but they didn't at the time. So when I transferred, they said, well, you need to take phys ed, which you look at my body, I'm not a phys ed type major who can do gymnastics and all that kind of stuff. So phys ed was really tough for me. But anyway, and the idea was you take phys ed, then you go to the University of Pennsylvania for your therapy certificate and you're a physical therapist. And they had a couple of guys that had done that, and they told me how to go about it. So I got into it, and one of the courses, because I transferred, I ended up with an abundance of credits, but I came up short of this 1 credit course in wrestling. Paul Billy coached it, and
you had to take a wrestling credit?
Yeah. But this is back in the Vietnam War era, and because of certain things, I didn't graduate with my class. I graduated in 1970. I started teaching in 1968. I didn't have my degree, but they needed teachers so bad back then. They're calling me up and saying, "Come teach." That's why I don't have my degree. Doesn't matter. We'll take you anyway. You're just one credit short. And so I had another guy. I had the vertebrae physiology course I had to take also. But this one credit wrestling course, I still remember the man's name, Dr. Ken Steers. And I said, Dr. Steers, you've got to waive this one credit course for me. I'm teaching now, and so I'm afraid that your students and you'll need these skills, and so I don't think I can. I said, look, I promise you, I will never be around a wrestling mat in my life. I mean, I'd never seen a wrestling match. I'd never been to one. I didn't know anything about it. Like I said, it didn't really exist at my time. Some of the public schools had it. William Penn had it. Brandywine had it, but very few schools. So anyway, Dr. Steers waived my one credit wrestling course.
Oh, really?
And so and then I go on and I'm teaching in the district. I was at Gunning Bedford, which used to be a high school, and then they made it a middle school. And I was teaching there, and they wanted to get they had a wrestling mat there. The high school had a team, but now the middle school didn't. So they wanted somebody to coach wrestling. And Bill Cole came down to see me. He was the AD at William Penn, who I very much wanted to impress because I wanted to be a football coach at William Penn. And I wasn't, so I didn't want to say no to Bill Cole, but he said, I want you to coach wrestling.
Why you of all people?
I don't know. Bill, he's deceased now, but I don't know why. I think one of my buddies had told him I would be a good coach or something, but I was at William Penn. Anyway, I said, Mr. Cole, I don't know anything about wrestling, absolutely nothing. He said, it doesn't matter. He said, you're going to come up to William Penn. The middle school wrestling didn't start till like the middle of December, right before the Christmas holidays back then. And he said, you're going to come up to William Penn. The season started November the 15th or whatever. And for 2 weeks, you're going to sit there and watch practice. And Coach Chapman is going to teach directly to you. He's a fantastic coach. He's going to set you up. So I did that.
The first job was for middle school or for high school?
Middle school.
Okay.
Gunning Bedford Middle School. So, trust me, there are some wrestlers at Gunning Bedford Middle School that knew way more wrestling than I did. So I start coaching, and I didn't know nothing. But the great thing, you know this, the great thing about wrestling, if you get around coaches or people, everybody wants to help you. Everybody will share their knowledge. I only ran into one coach my whole life that wouldn't tell me his best move or come and do my camp or whatever. Everybody, it's amazing, and so everybody help you. So we had our first match. And the referee was a gentleman named Bill Lorelli. I don't know if you've heard of that name or not, but Bill Lorelli, he's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. He's in the original class. He was captain of wrestling at Delaware. Great guy. Great wrestling man. And we used to coach at Christiana and in Tower Hill also. But anyway, after the match, his coach, can I talk to you for a while? I said, sure. He says, I noticed all your guys on bottom, they all stand up. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, any other moves? He said, no, sir. He said, well, why is that? I said, that's the only move I know. So he was kind enough and said, well, look, come up to Tower Hill on Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever. I don't know if you went there, so you know that little old room they used to have? They since turned it into a training office or something. But that little old room, I'd go up there and I'd watch him coach and picked a lot of good stuff up from Bill O'Reilly. And other coaches just... there's a guy down at St. Andrews called Webb Rayner. He's also in the Hall of Fame. Otis Chapman hooked me up with him. He was fantastic. And then Otis just, I can't tell you how much Otis Chapman did for me. He was amazing. He would come to my matches and scout and take notes and things I should do. But it was bad. I mean, I always remember this young man's name, Paul Johnson. He wrestled for me at William Penn, but he wrestled for me at Gunning Bedford my first year. And at least I knew nothing. And he's out in a match and ends up in a wizard situation. And I yell out, step over.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, oh, geez. Yeah, oh, geez. So it looked like the thing to do. And he stepped over, he's decked. And that's how it started. And but once I got going, I kind of fell in love with the sport and just started talking to anybody I could talk to, going anywhere I could go to watch. Went down to Billy Martin's camps down in Virginia. He was phenomenal. a guy down there named Keith Lawrence. Oh my God. And another guy that helped me out immensely was a gentleman named Mike McGlinchey. Mike and I were classmates in Delaware. We were football players together. Mike, one of the greatest coaches of all time. Mike was a national championship coach at Salisbury State in football and national champs in wrestling. So I would ride down to Salisbury all the time. And Mike, see, I didn't have his gift, but Mike, as a wrestler, college coaches, I go to clinics and they're teaching at a very advanced level, and it's a good move, but you have to break it down for a high school kid, And Mike had this great gift, he was Delaware's outstanding wrestler. He went to Newark High School, but he was phenomenal. He could take a complicated move and break it down and still make a good move out of it. And, I could teach to my high school kids. And I spent a lot of time with Mike McGlinchey. But that's what the beginning was like. I mean, it was going everywhere. Of course, there was no video back then.
Yeah.
And I would
How
go
many years did you
take
do middle
notes.
school?
Let's see, I did 3 years middle school.
But I mean, so I remember doing some clinics, and actually in Newcastle, whatever the school is across the street, down a little bit. I don't know what school that was, but across from the old Thriftway.
Right.
But the coach said, "Hey Corey, I don't know anything about wrestling, but if I didn't coach, these kids wouldn't be able to have a team."
Well,
so and I actually respected that more than somebody acting like they knew what they were doing. But so at the time, I guess you were asked to do it, but a lot of people would just view it as a paycheck, extra income. They're just going to coach any sport, even if they've never done it. But you fell in love with it.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, I didn't back then. There was books. I started buying every book I could buy, and I just became obsessed with learning wrestling. And I had a lot of good friends that were there. And William Penn's a great place to learn. When it was still a top school when Otis Chapman was there, and he was a phenomenal coach. And so and then I eventually became their freshman coach, and I was a freshman coach for a couple of years. And I just got into it in that respect. I think coaching wise, though, what I think I learned, I think I was a better wrestling coach than I was a football coach, even though I had played football in college and I competed all my life in football. I think when you do something all the time, there's a tendency to tell kids, you just do it. You scrape over here, you drop back over here. When I with wrestling, I had to learn everything as basic as you could have to learn it. Like, where does your thumb go? Why does it go? What do you just have to learn everything so basically because you have no skill, and that I think helped me as a coach. I can remember Coach Bassanelli one time saying how he disliked having to teach a switch to kids at the high school level because he thought they should know it all the time. I mean, that was no problem for me because that was a move I had to learn like a rookie.
I mean, I feel like when I wrestled you guys, I feel like you were the master of basics.
Well,
then in my era anyway, the Todd Mergenthallers of the world, the Joe Bonds, they're going to know all the advanced stuff just from all their experience or traveling the country anyway. But for all the other guys, the stand up, the switch, the double leg, all the half, the cradles, But I remember wrestling one guy, and I was being lazy, I wasn't sprawling, I hit a cut the corner. Well, you can't cut the corner on a double, so Jeff Snow took me down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I remember those things. So when you were when you became the head coach, though, were you teaching technique, or did you surround yourself with other great coaches, or who was in charge of teaching all your guys?
Well, I always had good assistant coaches, but I was the guy teaching the technique, and we were never, like you say, I had guys that were as advanced as anybody in the country, but they didn't get most of that from me. They got their basics from me, and we were always very, 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 very big. The same in football too, with Bruce Reynolds as the head coach. We were always very basic in football. In fact, we would do something like I'll give you an example. In football, we had about 6 different trap plays. Well, our assignments for those trap plays were all the same for the linemen, all the same. It would have been better systematically if we had different assignments. But we felt it was better that our guys, who were not the greatest scholars in the world sometimes, knew what they were doing and did it correctly than draw it up better, but then they don't remember it. And so I was always keep it simple, stupid, and that's pretty much what we always try to do. And then I had guys like if you came and you were wrestling with me, I would tell you, and you have this great move that some can't. You go ahead and do it. But if you're out there for 30 seconds and you're moving and working, you better go to my stuff, or I'm coming off the bench screaming at you because But I would always tell a guy, I'm not going to take a move away from you. It just better work, And I had a lot of wrestlers who would teach me moves over the years too. It's always a give and take, and some guys would go out and find something new. But I never stopped. I never stopped learning because I knew I didn't know anywhere near as much as the other guys. And Foxcatcher was great for me. I could go up to Foxcatcher and go up there. And I used to do a summer camp all the time. Did it for like 25 years. And I'd always bring the best. And I think one of the best wrestling coaches I ever met was Dale Bonsall.
Yeah.
And this is coming off. I just came from a dermatologist. Anyway, Dale would come down and teach whatever I asked him to teach, and I videotaped it. I have all kinds of videotapes of guys that like Dale Bonsall that like I said, respect for other coaches. One of the greatest coaches in Delaware, most people forget now, the guy named Roy Rigby. There's also Harry. Harry's a great coach too, but Roy he coached Milford to a state championship. Bought him from nothing to 6 state champions. I asked him to come up, and he had a fireman's carry that was brutal. And I said, would you teach your fireman's carry? He did 3 hours on nothing but the fireman's carry. But by the end of that night, everybody knew everything they could possibly know about the fireman's carry. I had so much, but that's wrestling. He'd give away his best stuff, because he loved it so much. And but that's how I got a lot of stuff. And then I'd have these guys on tape, and I'd watch the tape. And I'd also have guys come in. I've had guys, I would go to the NCAA. I went to the NCAAs for 32 straight years. And I got real good at sneaking down on the floor, forging credentials and doing whatever. I'd get down on the floor and talk to these guys. Hey, I got a kids camp back in Delaware. You mind coming in and doing a day, And I said, we'll pay you. And I wouldn't pay them much, and they would come. And I said, I'll put you up in a hotel, fly in, or you can stay at my house. Everybody always said, I'll stay at your house. I'd sit there and talk to Barry Davis, Gene Mills, the Bannock brothers. I did this for, I don't know, 10 years maybe. These guys, and we'd sit there and we'd talk wrestling. They were the greatest guys in the country. It was amazing. So it just was never ending. And I'll give you a little St. Mark's one. You guys used to kill us. We'd go in there and we'd go on a single leg takedown, double leg takedown. And this is before you. This is back before you. But they would lock up our crotch. And the next thing I know, we'd keep following those legs, and boom, the next thing I know, they'd be behind us and have the takedown. Used to drive me nuts. We'd do all the work, they'd get the takedown. But that was one of Steve's things. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to teach that. We never did that. Lock the crotch and scoot behind. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, cut the corner.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we didn't do that, but St. Mark's did. Kill us. So I'm talking one night up at the Foxcatcher with Andre Metzger, and anything I can help you with, Coach? I said, oh man, you got a counter for this. And he showed me. He said, oh, you're doing it all wrong. You do not, when a guy locks your crotch, you attack the face. You attack the face. You take this leg, you bump, you drop down, you attack the face, keep it, hook this leg, come around, boom, cross face. You got him. Show me. I went back, we taught that. Oh, I'll never remember. I don't remember what year it was, but St. Mark's comes out, and then boom, they go right to the guy. We hit that crotch side break, and we scored like the first 3-4 takedowns. Steve called all his guys together. That was funny, but yeah, it's amazing. Everybody in wrestling would share. So I had like a 30-year learning period.
I know that. I grew up in Newcastle, but the guys you had on your team, I'm sure there were some guys that were weak-minded, here and there, but it just seemed like as a whole, you guys were so mentally tough. It seemed like all your guys would run through a wall. It seemed like they were never nervous about coming out on it. That was a general feel, but I'm sure there were some guys here or there. But and then you have a 30-year background in the military. So, but how did give me a little bit of your philosophy though? I know we just talked about technique quite a bit, or your learning curve, but
Well,
what was your focus as a coach? Was it them to be mentally and physically tough? Was it master of the basics? Like, how did you go about having such a successful career, or wrestlers that competed for you?
Well, I did a military background, and we believe strongly in discipline, self-discipline particularly, but you can preach it all the time. But I came from team sports, and I'm not saying anything against, but we had different philosophies. Steve was very much individual philosophy of wrestling. He viewed it as an individual sport. He actually made a comment in the paper one time that anybody that thinks wrestling is a team sport has never wrestled. And he was correct. But I viewed it as a team sport. And we preached team. I mean, you would never see everybody on the team would be dressed exactly like. Nobody would have orange shoes or anything like that. That just wasn't, we always told people that, if you wanted to stand out and be noticed for something, it was going to be your wrestling, not your attire, not the way you dress. We dress as a team. We're a team. Everything is team. Because that's what I grew up with team sports, with football and baseball. Football in particular. Everything was always team, and everybody had their role and all that kind of stuff. And so when I went over into wrestling, it just was natural for me. That's the way I coached. That was just the way I coached.
But all your guys bought into it?
Well, they didn't have a choice, really. I mean, they didn't. I had a couple guys. I had a kid one time from Baltimore that transferred up here, and he was unbelievable. He actually won the Milford tournament at 119 as our guy's AD down at Laurel now. I can see him, he had red hair, but he was a state champ that year, and this guy beat him in the Milford tournament. He was phenomenal, but he didn't agree that we would always wear shirt and tie when we would go away. We would always. I said everything he wanted. He was going to be different in every way. So I mean, I told him, and I called his dad and everything else, and I didn't let him on a bus to go to a match. They said, "Well, you don't have a tie." I had ties. I said, "I got it. I'm not wearing it." Well, you're not getting on a bus, And so he ended up going back to Baltimore. I mean,
really?
And never. I think he would have been a Delaware state champion. I know he had beat the state champions in the Milford tournament, and I think he would have got nothing but better. So yeah, there were some guys that didn't buy into the program, but and it usually wasn't me. The other guys, and I was always big in senior leadership. I always preached that to the seniors that they even after they were done their senior year, they really had a job of relaying stuff on to next year's seniors and helping them get ready to become leaders and stuff like that. We just preached it all the time. And we also preached it in football. I mean, so these guys heard this in football, and then they heard this in wrestling, and for 10 years they heard it in baseball too. So, I mean, and you had a lot of the same guys.
You were coaching at William Penn football.
Yeah. So
it was easy then to try to get some of the football players who never wrestled to come out on the team?
Sure. This is my sales pitch. I would go up and I would tell them, okay, you're a lineman, okay, I want you to wrestle. Coach, I don't know about. Listen, you want to be All-State? Yeah, coach, I want to be All-State. You know how to be All-State? Look at our last All-State linemen. They all wrestled. You know why they made it All-State? Because they made their name in wrestling. It's an individual sport. They're there where you can make your name. Nobody knows offensive linemen, nobody at all. But you come out and wrestle, people get to know your name. Trust me, you're going to make All-State. I'm going to be your coach in both of them. And it's true. I swear to God, it's true. Newspaper guys that vote for All-State, they'll go, oh yeah, Creighton. Oh yeah, I think he should be All-State center because he's already a two-time state champ.
Yeah.
And he was. He was a two-time state champ, and the next thing you know, he was All-State center as a junior. And he was All-State center as a senior. Now, I don't want to belittle Damien, but I'm not quite sure he was All-State center as a junior. I know he was as a senior, but I'm pretty sure the reason he got All-State center as a junior was because he was already two-time state champ in wrestling. Yeah. And it's just, you get your name out there. Who knows offensive linemen? Nobody. John Testa, All-State, in football. But I think he was more known for wrestling,
So, like, your philosophy as a coach, though, is that, was that the way you were coached? Is that the way you were raised by your father? Is that the military? Like, how did you develop into the coach you became then?
Well, I was very, very fortunate in my life. I think this is amazing as a parent. You know, who does your son or daughter get as a teacher and a coach? And a lot of it, unfortunately, is luck, unfortunately, or else you got to move to a certain school district or go to a certain school. But I was so blessed. I mean, I played football for a guy named Dim Montero, who you may not know who that is, but they got a statue of him outside Abyssinia Stadium. He was one of the greatest. He was a national coach of the year in high school football. He knew everybody. It's amazing. He knew all the college coaches, and the reason I got a scholarship was because of him. I mean, I knew that in my mind.
Scholarship to Sally's or University of Maryland?
University of Maryland.
Okay.
I mean, in fact, he called me in, right down the 6 schools you're most interested in, and boom, oh, next thing you know, I'm visiting. You know, it was amazing. He was phenomenal. And then, but not just that, I had a guy named Archie Rapicelli, Jim Hagan, and Vinny Scott. Those are my 3 freshmen and JV coaches in Sally's football. They're all in the Delaware Sports Hall of Fame. I mean, you know, so I was blessed. And then I played baseball. I had Father Kenny, who was in the Delaware Sports Hall of Fame, holds the record, I think, for most wins in baseball. I was just blessed to have nothing but unbelievable coaches. Then I got I go to Delaware, and I got Tubby Raymond and Dave Nelson. I mean, the 2, you know, Dave Nelson for 2 years, Tubby for 2. I mean, you can't ask for, you know.
So when did you start playing baseball and football? Was that high school or before when you were younger?
Oh, when I was a kid, and then played in high school for Sally's. Yeah.
Now, football and college, were you on the varsity all 4 years?
Well, you didn't play varsity back when I was in college. Freshmen weren't allowed on the varsity. Okay. So I played freshman, and then I was on varsity. Okay. But it just had, I mean, when you're surrounded by that, I mean, just think of how many coaches I just told you that I had. When I made it in the Delaware Sports Hall of Fame, I said, I was so, even my first babysitter was a girl named Patsy Hahn, who's in the Delaware Sports Hall of Fame for golf. She was a professional golfer. I've just been surrounded by just good fortune.
Vinny Scott was my freshman history teacher at St. Mark's, and he was the varsity football coach.
He's the best. I mean, I'm surprised he never got you playing football.
I was playing. Okay. So when I went to Tower Hill, my dad died when I was 7. Funeral director was at my house, and I didn't play any sports at that time. My dad died when I was 7. The funeral director was at my house with my mother. There's some things I remember, some things I don't, right? But he got me signed up with baseball in Manor Gardens across from William Penn. Dang. So I played Manor Gardens from 7 to about 10 or 11. And then when I had moved from Newcastle down to Porter Square off 896 by Hudson, I ended up playing at Canal. But I played Manor Gardens for 3 or 4 years. And then I always wanted to play football. I tried wrestling one time, but I went to like 1 or 2 practices at the Wolverine Wrestling Club at Glasgow High School. But I never went back. And it was the Vittoris were there.
Right. Yeah.
And then when I got to Tower Hill, you had to play a sport as part of your gym class. So that's when I finally got a chance to play football. And then I started wrestling with George Martz. And then I would just continue on with baseball. So, and then when I got, I was in 8th grade, there was no internet, but I remember going to the state tournament for whatever reason, watching you guys. It was basically like, I felt like all William Penn and St. Mark's guys winning state titles. So then I ended up going to St. Mark's instead of staying at Tower Hill, and I wasn't a Tower Hill kid. I ended up, going to St. Mark's for high school. And then I really started to learn, actual wrestling instead of just some basic moves. And I was survived as an athlete, really, in middle school. And then I played freshman football. And then I wrestled all 4 years, and I decided not to continue with baseball. And then after freshman year, I decided not to continue with football either. I almost wish I would have, try, continue with both of them. I mean, I love playing all those sports, but I just got so caught up at wrestling, and that was our culture then, and partying and all that kind of stuff. But I love wrestling. It was new to me, like it was to you as a coach, and I hated to lose. I loved the individuality of it, and it was just something new, and it was cool to me. I mean, what I think I lacked, and that's why I really, I see the guys that you've had, and, I feel like, I lacked a little bit of mental toughness at times, or at least when it mattered, right? Especially. So you
should have been a colonial. I didn't realize you never lived in the district.
Been, yeah.
How did I not know you were in the district?
Well, I wasn't when I was in high school, right? I would have been Glasgow. I lived in Porter Square, so up until 10 years old, I lived in Chelsea Estates.
Oh, okay.
And then when I moved, I was down in Bear, Delaware, so I would have been Glasgow unless I choiced or something. But But there was a time when I got in trouble a little bit. I thought about coming to William Penn, but I stuck it out. Look, like Steve, I always say Mr. B, but Steve Bassinelli to me, it's no different than your guys. Like there was times where as a kid, you just hated the decisions that he made, but now as an adult, and I told him that when I had my first podcast was with him is, the reason why I can control myself nowadays, or the reason why I don't road rage somebody, or the reason why I think before I act, at least I try to, is because of the lessons that he taught me when I was young, and, I got in my sophomore year, he pulled me off the team the week of conferences. And if you don't go to conferences, you can't go to states, right. And I was ranked in the top 3, and it was just, and that's the year where I was like, I'm fucking leaving, I'm either going to Hodson, which I lived across the street, or I'm going to William Penn. But I never did that. But at that time, that's how pissed off I was. But at the end of the day, should I be mad at him or should I be mad at myself? Right? I'm the one that made the bad decision, and but that's how things transpired. But I have a ton of respect for him and everything that he taught me. It's just somehow, some way, when it mattered, I came up short. But I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I would have won a state title, would I have felt that I've achieved everything that I needed to achieve, and I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I don't know. My personality, I think, isn't that way, but I know plenty of people that are living off their state title from 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Where now, I think in the very beginning, I just always wanted more. I had unfinished business, and at least for the first 1 year after I graduated, I didn't do anything with wrestling or anything at all. I was just working, and we had a young family, but I didn't do anything. I wanted nothing to do with wrestling for at least, for that year. And then my father-in-law, at the time, my stepfather-in-law, he was a coach at St. Elizabeth CYO, so he got me back into coaching, and that was John Groom. So he got me into coaching to help him out. So I coached St. E CYO for about 5 years, as much as I could with my schedule at MBNA. And then in 2002, I started my own wrestling program. But, it's funny how life kind of takes you. But yeah, but I try. I always wondered, though, all your guys, it seemed so mentally tough. It just seemed like they had a job to do. They weren't. I'm sure deep down inside some of them were nervous, or they had nerves, or they were worried, or whatever, but they went out there and they got it done. And again, from my perspective, they were just a master of basics. Some of them could do some really good shit, but then other ones, they were just, I knew that the stand up, they could stand up with no problem every single time, almost like a college wrestler, so, I know you guys probably drilled that a ton, but I always wondered about the mental side of things and kind of how you approach that.
Well, I think, I really believe this with wrestling, and anybody. I've always said, you're standing on that podium as a champion. You ain't standing there alone. You look behind you and your workout partners and your teammates and the people and your parents, the people who sacrifice to get you there. And I always remember a guy you're very familiar with, Jordan Elliott, a tremendous wrestler, 2-time state champion. Yeah. I always remember his first day in the room. He comes in. He was a pretty hot shot junior high wrestler, and big reputation and everything else. And I don't think he'd ever experienced anything quite like our room. And one of our favorite drills was, we would put 4 guys in a circle, and it said, "Your turn, and then you're going to go 2 minutes against one guy, and then the next guy come in. So you're going to basically wrestle 6 minutes against three fresh opponents, right? And then the next guy will be in the circle, and then we would keep rotating like that, doing live wrestling." And so he jumped in a circle because he thought he was ready to go, and he jumped in a circle with Damian Creighton, Deion Jenkins, and Jeff Snow. So 2-time state champion, 2-time state champion, 4-time state champion. And, it didn't take long before he ran out of the room and ran in the pit. I had to go in and get him and, explain things to him a little bit. But, hey, I'm pretty sure sticking in that circle is why he became a 2-time state champion. You either get tough or you die. I mean, and we would, I don't know, we just did. I'm amazed. I'm trying to remember the gentleman. There's another St. Mark's person who was broadcasting the conference finals at William Penn, and they asked me to announce, and it's with him. So I guess I was the color guy. He was the announcer, and I was shocked at how many people got pinned in the finals of the Blue Line Conference.
When was this?
This year.
Okay.
They did all these pins. I'm saying, My God, I mean, I can remember in the conference finals, I mean, nobody got pinned. Nobody got pinned. And we used to do a drill, and a lot of practice is what we call a clap-out drill, where you go on your back, and somebody get their whatever hold they wanted on you, and then everybody in the whole, everybody in the whole gym is on their back, and then the other guys are on top, and then we start, and if you get out, you're still standing. We're not stopping yet. You start clapping, and then another guy gets out. He gets up. He starts clapping. So now there's 4 guys clapping, and then another guy gets out. Now there's 6 guys clapping until you got some poor guy still on his back and been there for several minutes and got the whole room clapping till he gets off his back. You can't get pinned. I mean, more dual meets are lost than won, because people let themselves get pinned. And I think when I say let themselves get pinned, I think there's a lot to that. Everybody gets stuck every so often. I can remember Damien Creighton, we were up wrestling in Northampton up in Cedar Cliff Duels, and Damien went in 6-1 and got hit with a cement mixer, and boom.
Speaking of the ultimate team then, right? Not individuals, teams. If you had a kid that you just knew wouldn't win the match probably, is he going out there to win, or are you telling him you do whatever you got to do not to get pinned?
Oh, he's got a job to do. Everybody's got a job to do. We gave everybody a job the week of that match or whatever, and you would know what your job was. That doesn't mean you couldn't do extra, but if you were going to be successful, you're either going to bonus points, win, lose a tough one, save a point. Greatest example is we're wrestling one of St. Mark's best teams ever. Sheldon Thomas is a senior, and I got a freshman named that's going to wrestle him, and Chris Armstrong is the guy.
That was Chris?
Chris.
Okay.
Chris is a freshman. Sheldon's a senior, and Sheldon's already national champ like 4 times or whatever, and we told Chris, we said, look, if you wrestle Sheldon 100 times, he's going to win 100. That's just the fact of life. But what you are going to win is that you're going to win the whole match. And that's because you're not going to let him pin you. This match is going to come down to whatever. And so we trained him special. We used to call it our little room. We had a separate room where one of my assistant coaches, Howdy Duncan, would take a kid and just grab a couple other kids to work with him, and they would work separate all week long on what he had to do. And Sheldon used to like the Shirella with legs. That was his favorite move. And so we worked on that move all week long. He said, you can't give him your arm. Don't let him have your arm. You grab your titty and you just don't let him have your arm. And of course, so Sheldon beat the snot out of him, and Tech fought him in the first period, but he never got that, that Graham, what do you call it? I mean, the leg move with the head over the arm.
Oh, guillotine?
Guillotine. Yeah, thank you. He never got that. He never got that, but he beating the crap out of him, and he got the matches over. Sheldon got legs in, he laying on top of him, and got frustrated. And hit him in the back of the head with his palm. Boom, team point, and Tech fall, another team point, and we won that. We won that match, 25-22.
Okay.
Never forget. So at a funeral later, I had a bunch of guys at a funeral, and they're all surrounding Chris, and they're all talking to Chris. I knew what they were talking about, and Chris won 100 and some matches for us. They weren't talking about any of his wins. They were all talking about the Sheldon Thomas match. So, and we would explain this to our boosters too, what a kid's job was, And we had a match. I had a kid named Moriel McDuffie wrestled Testa one year, and Testa beat him 8-3. Our fans gave him a standing ovation. He did his job, saved us.
That's a good way to put it, though. You're not going to win your match, but you're not going to win your match, but you're going to win the duel.
Right.
You're going to win the duel for us, because that's a real positive twist in it. But you would go as far as to meet or talk to your boosters, your fans, and explain to them like what you were going to do, or how their perspective should be. Like, don't boo this kid because he's not wrestling.
No,
Cheer him because he just won us a match by not getting pinned or tagged.
They would all know. Our fans would know. And our fans, I mean, we had some kids, many kids got beat, but got standing ovations. And that doesn't mean you can't win. I mean, we're not telling you can't win. But we have a kid named, you never heard this name. And he wrestled one match away in his entire career. One varsity match in entire name. Brian Giblin. And he beat a young man named Trevor Foster, who was second in the state to Damian Creighton. In fact, he had Damian beat till the last couple of seconds. But Trevor was really, really good. And this kid, Brian Giblin, had rounded shoulders and was phenomenal, staying off his back. That was his skill. And so, again, Howdy worked with him all week long, and he went out there and just frustrated Trevor, frustrated him until Trevor took a bad shot. Boom. Next thing you know, we're around behind. And he beat Trevor Foster.
Really?
He got Athlete of the Week. And the only match.
One varsity match ever.
One varsity match. Athlete of the Week. News Journal Athlete of the Week. One match. He couldn't beat our other guy. He couldn't. But and there's just different things like that come up where guys have jobs to do, and it doesn't mean that you can't go on and go ahead and win the match if things happen to go in your favor. But you know what your job is, and so you wrestle different. If I don't have to. I can be a little more defensive maybe, or I can be this or that. I know I used to drive Steve crazy. He would never think about doing that. But that's just a different philosophy. And trust me, I all the respect in the world for Steve. I always envied his wrestling talent. That I wish I had that. What I could have done with coaching. Jordan Elliott was a great leg wrestler. He didn't get that from me. I mean, I didn't know anything about legs other than what I would get people to tell me. But I think, it's just like upper body. We didn't do a lot of upper body because, I think there's a lot of feel in that, and touch, and I didn't have that. So, yeah.
Is there anything you would have done differently over the years?
Yeah, I wish I had high school wrestling. I'd love to have wrestled.
No, but as a coach,
as a coach?
Is there anything you look back on and say, man, if I could have done it all over again?
I one do-over I would love to have, and a young man probably hates me to this day, but I wrestle off work. I used to always tell my guys, look, I believe in wrestle offs. We'd have them all the time, but I'd say I also believe in flukes and this and that. And so if you knock off my state champ or wrestle off, I may not. I'll always determine the lineup. Always. I'm going to move people up and down, moving people around. I believe in that. I'm big in that because, again, I'm team. Some other coaches would never move anybody anywhere. That's that guy's spot. So I had a kid that wanted to wrestle off, and then we were wrestling Smyrna that night. I didn't know this, but he had his grandparents there and everything because he wanted to wrestle off. But it got to the match, and I wrestled my regular guy because the match meant the match, And my regular guy got beat, and that kid, everybody came to watch him. And, he got another match later on, and it's something that didn't matter. But I wish I had done that. And that's my one door. But you have that happen. Like I said, this is a good one. I had a kid come to me one time, and Jeff Garber, and he knocks on my door, and this is late at night. I was going in. I just want to tell you, it was right at Christmas. My grandfather gave me a ski trip to Wyoming.
Oh, boy.
And he said, but it's the first Saturday, the first weekend in February, St. Mark's match. So we always wrestled the first Saturday in February. I said, well, thank you for coming. I appreciate you doing the right thing. You're telling me well ahead of time and everything else like that. And so, okay, that's the way to do it. I appreciate it. We'll go without you, no problem. And he was a 90% starter at times. But so anyway, comes time, knock on my door again. Coach, can we talk about the match? This is now like a week or two before the match, Go over it, and I said, well, what will I be wrestling? I said, well, I depends how things go, down low. He was a 52-pounder. And I said, I really don't know. and he had lost to this kid at the Milford tournament, St. Mark's wrestler. And so he goes home again, and I said, we're still going good. A couple of nights, said nothing, knock on my door. Can you go over this one more time? What's going to happen if what happens? And so, I always had what I thought would be the best, the worst, and probable for every match. I always had that figured out. And I said, well, let's go through it again. Here's the best, and you're definitely wrestling. And here's
this is the kid that's supposed to be on a ski trip.
Yeah, and we're going over here. I go to all the thing with him. I said, so I really won't know until we see what happens at 45, So anyway, bottom line, he doesn't go on a ski trip. With no guarantee he's going to wrestle. And as I would have it, he did wrestle, and he pinned the kid. And it was amazing. The kid had beat him Milford. But I still remember, match over, boom, that arm went up in the air. He was probably the most excited I ever seen by him. That was a great one. But, he could have gone on the trip, too. I mean, that would have been fine because he told me way ahead of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, he gave the ski trip to his brother. And
it sounds more of like the Tower Hill Sanford scenario.
Oh,
where
yeah.
Not real wrestlers.
Yes.
They're scheduling trips like that where wrestlers will never do that.
Oh, God. When I first got to Tower Hill, I was athletic director. I wasn't planning on coaching, but Bruce Kelly was the coach. But Bruce and I didn't. Anyway, it was a long story there. But so I was coaching wrestling, and Bruce was my assistant. Oh, God. They said, there's no practice over Christmas. I said, excuse me? There's no practice. And so I negotiated. They finally said, okay, there could be 1 week of practice, and 1 week they're completely off. And I said, well, what about for a kid that really wants to? Michael Alvarez, for example,
yeah.
And his dad. So we finally got it down, and there could be 1 week of practice that the kids would have to come to, but then 1 week they didn't have to come to at all, except if they really wanted to. And so it was me, Michael, and about 2 or 3 other kids over the 1 week. But I almost died when I went to Tower Hill, and they told me that. I said, "You don't practice over Christmas? 2 weeks? You're going to take 2 weeks off?" Yeah, but we did get that changed a little bit. Yeah, 1 week and 1 week off. And that was the compromise. But yeah,
So I feel like most of the time, like this question is more applied to somebody that competed in the sport, but with as many years as you had coaching. But like, what is translated from wrestling, all the life lessons, but everything from wrestling that you've been able to translate into life, or raising your family, or your 2 boys, or like how, like when especially the non-wrestling people that might see this, what lessons and life lessons and things that are off the mat that have nothing to do with wrestling, but you got it from wrestling? Like, what are all the benefits to wrestling? That you can, some of the things you can talk about that are most important to you.
There's many. Like when Dan Gable says, once you wrestle, everything else is easy. But discipline is number one. Right off the top of my head, you can't be a successful wrestler if you don't have some type of discipline. And I've had numerous discipline problems with the wrestlers over the years, but nonetheless, when they got done 4 years with me, I think they learned whether they agreed with it or not. Like you said, you got disciplined by Coach Bassinelli, and as an adult, you see his thinking more now. And at the time, you didn't. I'm sure I got a bunch of wrestlers like that too that didn't agree with me at the time. But the sport itself, teaches you discipline too. Just the various moves. You have to do things right, and you can't cheat a move. You can't cheat. There's no shortcuts to wrestling. There are none. You either gotta put in the time, put in the work, and in the match. And so you learn that. And then I think another huge thing you learn in wrestling. Everybody talks about who wants it the most. Well, I've never found it to be who wants it the most. Who wants it the most the longest? Because this thing right here gets more tired quicker than any other muscle in the body. And the people that had that mental toughness you're talking about. And you have to you have to develop. You can develop mental toughness. You work at it all the time. You work at it. And those lessons, you want to hire a good worker, you hire a wrestler, they'll go outside today and they'll move mats all day long and everything else, and they'll still be gone when everybody else has quit. There's no, or if they do quit, and I never cut a wrestler in my life. Never, ever did I cut a wrestler. but I've had a lot of them quit. They couldn't do it. They just could not discipline themselves. And part of that was you got to come to practice every day. And if you don't come to practice, and I'm going to be right there. Where were you? What? Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you call me ahead of time? And those answers better be good. Because I would be, and they knew they were going to have to face that as soon as they walked in the room. You know Clinton Burke, right?
I know the name.
You know the name. Well, he's great. I'm prejudiced, but he ranks right there with Sheldon. I think he's the greatest wrestler ever come out of Delaware. He lost the national championship to a guy named Claire Anderson, who he had beaten 5 times that year. 5 times that year, and it was the first year of the assistant official, and he had a takedown taken away and a takedown given by the assistant official, which never should happen. Lost 5-3, and then his senior year, he was up in New York City, and he took thirds. He took second and third in the Nationals, wrestled for Oklahoma. His first day at Wiener Penn, I threw him out of the room because he was late. He came late to practice. I told him to go home. Well, thank God he came back. But he wasn't Clinton Burke at the time.
Do you ever think you were overly strict?
Probably, but not. I don't.
But never backfired too much.
I mean, there's some wrestlers I'm sure would tell you, but there's a lot would tell you they liked what I did and everything else. But and I tell coaches this all the time. I did coaching clinics. And you got to be so careful what we say. I mean, I have a lot of, remember when you said it, remember when you said it. A lot of times I don't. Like, oh, yeah. But, you just be kidding around. Yeah. And a kid takes it dead serious. Or you just, But I think it's so important, talking to kids and whatever. But, so, yeah, I feel that's the worst part. I mean, you feel great about coaching the kids that took it right, and that's great. But I always feel... no one's come up to me and said son of a bitch, I couldn't stand it. Nobody, I haven't had that happen. But I'm sure there's somebody out there would like to run into me and tell me that. But you do what you believe in. I had a lot of great coaches. Another great coach was Bill Cole, who's in the Delaware Sports Hall of Fame. He was like my second father. He was amazing, and you have to have your philosophy, your personal philosophy. When I applied for the job, he asked me what's my philosophy. I didn't know what he was talking about. And he said, well, do you have it written down? And I said, no, sir. He said, well, you don't have a philosophy until you have it written down. And I did that. And he said, then you write it down, put it in a drawer, pull it out once a year or so, every couple of years. And it's the same as you weed your garden. So as things go out of style, things go this and that, weed your garden. And he said, keep that philosophy, but that's your basic philosophy. He said, if you lose doing what you believe in, so much. Now, like, for example, my first big encounter was St. Mark's, 1978. The first year we wrestled, Clay Jester was our coach, and we had a 48-match win streak. And it was the biggest crowd I ever saw in St. Mark's. They had the end bleachers pulled out, everything. We had a standing room only. There had to be close to 3,000 people there. It was amazing.
Good old days.
Hell, the good old days. It was amazing. Newspaper articles before everything else. We had a 48-match win streak on, and they had just beaten a team up in Council Rock up. It was had a coach named Vic Stanley. He was outstanding, and nobody was beating Council Rock at the time but St. Mark's. Clay Jester was St. Mark's coach. They beat him. So anyway, the place was packed, and came down to the 185 match. And I had a guy named Benny Henningsen who was really great, and they had a guy named Stafford. And, our takedowns were our thing, as you know. We were taking down. Stafford took us down. We got beat. Heavyweight was next. By the time the match was over, we pinned it heavyweight and make the match close. But the match was over, going into heavyweight. But we got beat doing what we do best. We got beat. So you just shake the guy's hand, say, congratulations, you beat us doing what we do best. And he did. So, I think that's important. I think you can live with yourself if you have your philosophy, stick to your philosophy, and live and die with it,
So in a nutshell, and it sounds like things have adapted over the years, but in a nutshell, what is your philosophy?
Well, it depends on the sport. Number one is you keep it simple. I'm football, baseball, whatever, and you execute fundamentals. You execute fundamentals. You keep things simple for the kids. You give every kid a fair chance. You give every kid, treat everybody fairly, and discipline is super important. Team comes first. That's always the thing. The team over the individual, and then you get a little more sport specific. Whether it's football or wrestling. And in wrestling, my whole emphasis was always on takedowns, and then it was always on bottom, and we did our least amount of work on top, and we would always trade you 2 for 1. If I was going to a wrestling match, I would love to be up 6-2 at the end of the first period and take you down 3 times, let you go twice. I felt we pretty much had the match at that point. And then we take bottom, always took bottom second period. We always took bottom second period because you're the freshest and you want to get out. They want to be on bottom of the third period. That's like to prevent, So, and then we get out, take the guy down again. Now it's 8-3, and we're off and running. Now is whether we're going to get bonus points or not. And if he chooses down, I can. If I think I have the skill to turn him, I'll do it. If not, just play takedown the rest of the time. And that was it. So when we worked on top, we were pretty good with tilts. I mean, Paul Antonio, Paul Collier was big into it too. But then Paul Antonio, those guys with tilts. Oh my God, And Paul Antonio and Jim Zimmerman came up with a locked hands tilt.
Mm-hmm.
You know that, right?
I know that one well.
Okay, well. It was a big secret until Paul Antonio decided to tell a newspaper guy one time. The next thing you know, they started putting 2 officials on the mat against us at the state tournament and of course it's illegal if you do it wrong. If you tilt it, if you lock before you tilt, it's illegal. But if you tilt and then lock, locked hands is fine if he's on his back.
Damien used to do it both ways, and I remember that pretty well.
I mean, we got called on it a couple of times. They said too early penalty point, but yeah, Damien was tough, but Paul was the one that really, Paul and Jim Zim, they kind of, and along with Paul Collier.
Where did they get that from?
I don't know. They taught it to me. I didn't teach it to them. Like I said, that was a lot of that stuff would be just stuff. You just get together and work on different stuff. We would sometimes in practice, we'd give 5 minutes to work on whatever you want to work on. Guys would come up with different stuff, nonsense stuff,
Yeah.
And then we would name it after you. If you scored with in the match, we'd name it after you, So it could be the Frederick,
Yeah.
or the Corey, whatever. If you scored with in the match before anybody else did.
Both your boys wrestled, right?
Yeah.
How young were they when they started?
Oh, they were young. Yeah, they were.
At St. Pete's?
Yeah, St.
And then they both wrestled at Sally's?
Sally's, both wrestled at Sally's, yeah. That was.
Now, did they played other sports as well?
My one son was cross country, my other son was baseball.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another duo I would like them to go into William Penn.
I was curious. I mean, I know you're a Sally's alum, but you coached and taught at William
Well,
Penn.
it wasn't. It was it was a religious type thing. I had nothing against William Penn. I mean, trust me, William Penn. When I was there, was a great education. We had some of the best teachers in the world. Harry Cooch was a presidential math teacher. You got a guy named Johnny Unitas, presidential award winner in science. The list goes on. They're really great teachers. But and I had to talk to our superintendent about it too. He was a little concerned, why I was. But I thought my mom and dad worked at Sally's. I had gone to Sally's. My brother had gone to Sally's. My wife's family, her father had gone to Sally's. All her brothers went to Sally's, and it was more of a religious type thing. We all went to Catholic schools, but all the way up. And
yeah, that makes sense. So you weren't going to set them to St. Mark's?
Oh, that wasn't going to happen. But I mean, in hindsight, really, I nothing against Sally's, but I think one of the things I really missed was coaching my sons.
Well, how were you able to balance that with your schedule and their schedule?
I missed a lot of their matches, which is unfair to them, but they were great about it. I did my best to get there.
They both became wrestling officials.
Yeah.
Did they wrestle in college or no?
No. Well, they tried to. It's amazing. My one son went to Notre Dame. They dropped wrestling the year he got there. He was going to wrestle for Notre Dame, and my oldest son, Matt, and they dropped it the year he got there. And then my other son went to Salisbury, and they dropped wrestling. Unbelievable. National championship program, man. But so they didn't get to wrestle. And in college, they would have both liked to, I think. But yeah, I wish I got to coach him. I had to watch my one son, greatest match I ever saw, and we're wrestling Sally's. It's a big match. It's going to come down to, whoever does whatever. My son is wrestling my captain, and I'm sitting there in a chair, and boom, as close as you are to me, the edge of that mat, my son's on his back. I wanted that pin, but I knew my son had never been pinned. I knew how important that was to him. Boom, he fights off, gets up, gets away, boom, he's back down. He's losing 10. He's losing 10-1. 10-1 in the first period. And anyway, match ended up 14-11. My son won.
Okay.
And one of the greatest comebacks I ever saw. He runs off and jumps in John Rusnack's arms, and I got to console my guy. It was
Did you just sit silently on the side, or did you coach against your boys?
I coached against in
Really?
dual meets. I never coached them against them in the States. And I told my wrestlers, I said, look, when it's team, and they got their coach, we're a team, and we're just competing against each other.
How's your kids feel?
I told them that. We sat down and talked about it. And you understand that? And I said, I never coached against you like individually, but this is just the team stuff. But then in the States, I never did. I always, Hallie Duncan coached them and against them in the States. And of course, he was like their, godfather. He felt bad about it too, but he did it. Yeah, I never coached against him in the States, but that would have been tough.
So you have the DIAA, you got coaches, committees, you got all these NWCA, you got all these different things. How'd you get so involved, or why did you want to be so involved in all the off the mat types things?
I didn't, but what happens is, let me try to think of the names anymore. Bob Bubb, have you ever heard that name? Bob Bubb used to be head coach at Clarion. It was like this was in the late 80s. And we'd been pretty successful and had some good teams. And he was recruiting Paul Antonio. And Paul went there. And so he said to me, are you in the National Wrestling Coach Association? I said, yeah, sure. I join every year. I go to I get tickets and go to the Nationals 32 years in a row. I go, I've never seen you. I go, well, what do you mean? He said, I've never seen you at the NWCA convention. I said, I don't know, I've never done it. You're not involved at all? It's sort of embarrassing me, He said, coach like yourself, no involvement whatsoever? And I said, I never really thought about it. He goes, why don't you think about it? I said, okay. He said, why don't you think about maybe being the head of the Delaware chapter? All right. Okay. I don't want to piss him off, because Paul's going to go there. I don't want Paul to get the scholarship. And so I became the Delaware, guy leading the Delaware chapter of the NWCA. And I found out in life, if you stick around long enough, I think Yogi Berra said it, 99% just showing up, Next thing you know, I was the regional guy. Next thing you know, I'm the national guy.
Yeah.
It just sort of happened, and so, and then I had the DIAA. I had a lot of health problems. I had my bypass surgery and knees replaced, and I had to get out of coaching. I got out of coaching. I missed it like crazy, and I couldn't stand being in school. So some people asked me to do the DIA thing. I said, yeah, I'll do that. And then I got a phone call from Tyrant one day, and that was just it. I just never ever thought I thought I'd die at William Penn, but and the DIA thing.
Well, you did it the right way versus some other people did it the wrong way. You got your pension and all your state time in, and then you went private.
Yeah, I never thought that. But I enjoyed it. I did 12 years at Tyrell. I really.
Was it that long?
Yeah, I had a great time here. That's a good school.
A couple more things for you, just for the sake of time. I mean, you got 2 wrestling rooms named after you. One at William Penn and one at Tower Hill. You got a lot of things, but I mean, how's that make you feel? And
it's. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I never felt good about the one at Tower Hill because I really didn't do anything at Tower Hill. There were some very kind people who, when we did some renovations there, I really enjoyed that. I got there, and the new headmaster gave me carte blanche. I want you to design all these athletic facilities, and we're going to take off. We're going to raise $12 million my first year there. And it was fun. I mean, it was really, I never got a chance to do all that, And I got very involved with a lot of people and did a lot of, I learned a lot about going around to rich people and asking for money. It was interesting, The headmaster he was the closer. I was the setup guy. I'd come in with my charts and what we're going to do, and these little dinner parties, be like 6 couples. I found out if you're rich, you get invited to a lot of dinner parties. I've never been rich, so I think that those people must really have to master the art of saying no on the dinner parties they get invited to. And you're going to get hit for big bucks, and everything's got a name on it at Tower Hill, But and so this one family, a very, very wonderful, wonderful family, they're the ones that put up the funds to have my name on that room.
Put up the money, you can name it whatever you want, right?
Yeah. And so they instead of having their name on it, they put my name on it, which I was very grateful to them, but I never quite felt, like now the William Penn thing, a lot different. I actually, I feel like I did something at William Penn. I spent 25 years. I spent more than that there, but I spent 25 years as a head coach. I was freshman coach for 3 years. So I 28 years coaching everything, plus all the other stuff. I felt like, and they did it right too. They put some criteria in for what they require before they'll name something, because they kind of came out of nowhere when they did that. And they named football after Bruce Reynolds, and baseball after Mel Gardner, and softball and field hockey after Rosemary Bianchini. And they set this certain criteria. So I think they really did a great job with it, and it was neat the way they did it. So I feel very honored about that one.
I ran a summer camp. I don't know if you recall this, but I ran a couple summer camps at Tower Hill, and the one year I had you come in. You were still at AD there, but I had you come in as a guest speaker for the high school part of it, and that was probably one of the only times I really ever heard you speak. And I've seen some other things from a distance, but how did you develop, your knack for public speaking?
Oh, I'll tell you, I've done a lot. I enjoy it. I enjoy it, but I'll tell you, Bruce Reynolds. You've never probably heard
Is he the bodybuilder?
No, Bruce Reynolds was the head football coach at William Penn.
Okay.
Probably one of Delaware's top coaches of all time. In fact, he retired. He had the record for the most wins. Bob Tattersall has since passed him, but Bruce was phenomenal, and he's a phenomenal speaker. And I always envied his ability to speak. And early on in our careers, and I said, he gave a talk, and I said, man, I don't know how you do that. And you just like off the top of your head. And he goes, off the top of my head. He said, you have any idea how many hours I spent preparing that so it looks like it's off the top of my head? And I know, and he told me, he said, I probably spent 25 to 35 hours getting ready for that talk. Really? And he showed me some of his, he had notes. And so I emulated him. I started doing little speaking engagements here and there. And you get more and more offered. You start having success, like CYO teams ask you to their banquets and stuff like that. And then just different things. But I just did my granddaughter asked me to speak at the wedding. When my son Matt passed, so I walked her down the aisle. It's phenomenal. So when she asked me, I was thrilled with that. And then she called me and said, could you say a few words? I said, oh, geez, that's a whole different thing. But I probably spent, there was the bridesmaid, or whatever you call them, she gave a talk, and the best man gave a talk, and I gave a talk. Well, they all read off notes. I don't do that, I just, but the reason I don't do that is because, by the time I get done with all my notes, and by the time I do all my rights and everything else, you got in your head.
Yeah.
So I spoke, and went real well. I probably spent 25 to 35 hours on that. And I've given, I gave a talk at the National Wrestling Coaches Association Banquet one year. yeah, just collect material. I got folders on everything, jokes, humorous stories. You just try and I think one of my best ever was I spoke at the Wrestling Hall of Fame banquet. They were inducting John Testa and Bruce Kelly and Jerry Lamy. And they asked me to talk. I said, "You want me to talk?" The two St. Mark's guys going in, "You want me to talk?" And they said, "Oh yeah." I don't know how that's going to go, St. Mark's crowd. But it was at St. Andrews in the springtime. I got there and I said, this is a great evening. I said, love is in the air, springtime. And this is back when Elizabeth Taylor had just married her 8th husband or something like that. And I said, love is definitely in the air. And I said, and even here locally, I said, I remember Jason Bastinelli just recently announced his engagement to, I can't remember her name now, Kristen somebody from up in Pennsylvania. I said, I just think it's really nice that Jason likes his women like he likes his wrestlers from out of state. That was the year St. Mark's had like 7 or 8 guys came from different states. Place went nuts in the St. Mark's crowd. But it's just I do really. His grandma didn't like it too much, so she came.
You gotta be able to laugh.
She came up. I just thought it was. I wasn't. But and I said a lot of nice things about St. Mark's. I mean, it's funny. I think it's kind of odd here. And here we are talking. Like I told you, I did the Blue Line Conference with another St. Mark's wrestler. I worked at Tower Hill for years with Bruce Kelly. We're best buds, and worked with Stan Spoor back at William Penn. And it's amazing over the years. And like you say, you have this respect-hate relationship with your opponents at the time. Because I mean, my God, how many times did you beat some good William Penn wrestlers? I remember Stan knocked off some good ones. Bruce, of course, him and Todd had some battles. But it's funny how the respect you have. I do remember one of your matches, and I don't know if you remember.
This was a good one.
It was you got beat 1-0.
Don Frommel.
Don Frommel. And I don't know if you remember in the article or not, but after Kevin Chosini came up and talked about how a lot of people thought it was a horrible match, because nothing happened. I said, people just don't appreciate good wrestling. I said, because there was all kinds of good stuff, counter back, boom, back, and for a match to go 1-0. And of course, you gave him the 1 point, you let him go, thinking you were going to take him down. And there was so much good defense in that match, on both sides. And 2 good wrestlers, a lot of respect for each other, and it's separated by 1 point. And that was, like I said, you gave him the point. Who knows if you could have ridden him out and what he go? Who knows? But but there's a respect there. You can just tell that you know your opponent, you scouted your opponent, and you have that respect for the work he's put in, and you know how tough it is. So that's the thing. I mean, and it's just the same thing on the coaching level. I always had the greatest respect for Steve and the job he did, and I always knew no matter what, I got one year we were supposed to, win big, and we almost lost. And the year one of my proudest years, I think it was 98. I think you guys had 8 guys in the finals.
9 in the finals and 8 champs that year.
It was, and we lost by close margin. And one of my guys, I remember this match because we were like 8-6 that year or something. We were not one of my better teams, but I had a kid that put David Williams on his back, and in overtime, they went overtime. My kid hit with a headlock, went her back, and then John Viet was the referee and blew the whistle, stopped the match, and gave us the takedown, and never let us. I think we lost by 5 points, something like that. I forget what it was. It was close. I was probably never more proud of a team my whole life. I mean, we were way outgunned, but we really wrestled well, and I love that. But yeah.
Well, over the years, honestly, there was times where you and I communicated, and then there was plenty of times we didn't because there was no reason to. And I always wondered, I wondered from both sides, whether it's Steve Asnelli or you, and was there love, was there hate, was there this, was there that. But I'll tell you, when you reached out to me a few weeks ago and offered me Mr. March, my middle school coach's painting, that really touched me, and it meant a lot. And it just made me feel like all the bullshit that I might have thought over the years wasn't even accurate. But I have the utmost respect for you. I always have, even though I didn't know you real well. But everything that I saw from a distance or even up close, and congratulations on everything. And then, like I said, I really do from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for thinking of me and offering.
Well, you know what? I mean, remember we were at Napoli Pizza, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how it came up. And you mentioned George Morris. Like, George, what?
And you watched my podcast. You watched or listened to that podcast because you were telling me about some things. But my middle school wrestling coach. But he was.
Well, I just like George is such a great guy, such a great artist. And I had those things. I have other ones. I hang in my beach house, and God Almighty, I just said, well, if you know him,
that meant the world to me. And I wanted you to know that because you didn't have to call me or you didn't have to think of me of all people, and that could have went up on another one of your walls in one of your houses. And it just for us, it's not like I was one of your former wrestlers. I was the rival across town, so it meant a lot. And I think as I've gotten older, you realize there was plenty of guys from William Penn that I was friends with and I hung out with, and then there was guys that I felt like we hated each other. It's not just Penn; it was anywhere, right?
Sure.
But this sport has really this sport is my life. And it's brought me, a lot closer to many people. And if we can set our egos aside, or we can set our competitiveness or our alpha male, there's some people that I know that are they're part of wrestling now, but they didn't wrestle or something. But they're almost like we're our worst enemy, our own worst enemy. Like we're so competitive or we're so alpha, and sometimes we don't get along. Like it's too much testosterone in the room. But in any event, I just want to thank you for coming in today. I appreciate everything, and I look forward to hopefully working with you a little bit in the future. And you just tremendous career, and you've done a lot for Delaware and William Penn and everybody that you've ever come in contact with. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Jordan, thanks for having me. And it's impressive what you've done, my man. It's impressive.